Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Susie Duran from Poder Latinx, and I'm the Georgia State Director. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our webinar discussion, Defiende, Bosque, the Atlanta campaign to stop Cop City. How did we get here? About Poder Latinx. Poder Latinx is a civic and social justice organization looking to build a political wave where the Latinx are decision makers of our political process and play a vital role in the transformation of our country. Our work includes issue-based organizing, leadership development, expanding the electorate, and year-round civic engagement. Thank you so much to our guest speakers for joining. And I'm gonna go ahead and let y'all introduce yourselves. From Sunrise Atlanta.
Hey y'all, my name is Sheza. I'm with Sunrise Atlanta. We are an organization of young people who are working to stop climate change through powerful political actions, art and telling stories, and mobilizing people and building people power. I'm really excited to be here to talk about Cop City and the work all of the leaders and organizers here have done to try and stop the ordinance.
All right, thank you, Sheza, so much, and thank you, Sunrise. Also, to introduce from Atlanta Democratic Socialist of America.
Hey y'all, this is Kelsey. I'm with the Atlanta Democratic Socialists of America and our campaign to defund the Atlanta Police Department and refund communities, also known as DARC. We're a 1,000+ member organization that believes that working people should run both the economy and society democratically to meet human needs, not to make profits for the few.
All right, thanks, Kelsey, and thank you, Atlanta DSA. And next we have someone from Community Movement Builders.
Hi, I'm Marte White. I'm from Community Movement Builders, Radical Black Liberation Organization. I'm excited to be with all of you to talk about Cop City. We've been working really hard on trying to fight against it, and I think that being on this panel is also part of that fight. All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Marte, and for the work Community Movement Builders has been doing. Thank you so much for all three for hopping on this. So just overall, what is Cop City? What is this campaign? What does Defiende el Bosque, defend the Atlanta forest mean? So I'm going to put it over to Kelsey from Atlanta DSA to just give us, a recap on, the details of this campaign, the ordinance, what's been going on, what's been happening, what have y'all been doing, and what have they been doing? So Kelsey, thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Susie. This campaign has been a bit of a doozy. So in early June, we heard word that Joyce Shepard, the city councilwoman of Atlanta's 12th district, was presenting an ordinance to the City Council Finance Committee that would essentially give away for free or lease 381 acres of historic public forest in unincorporated DeKalb County to the Atlanta Police Foundation. And this proposal came about in a completely undemocratic manner. There was no time or space for community input, for community feedback, anything like that. And yet Joy Shepard was claiming this whole time, my constituents want this. And so the ordinance, when it was originally presented to the Finance Committee, it ended up being tabled until August 16th, which was yesterday. And at that point, Atlanta DSA decided to get involved along with Sunrise Movement and Community Movement Builders. And between then and now, we've been campaigning. We've been canvassing every weekend in Joyce Shepard's 12th district, in the 5th district, and in unincorporated DeKalb County, Gresham Park, near the area where the forest actually is. So a little bit about this plan and what this training facility would actually look like. So the entire facility would cover 85 acres, and the entirety of the space that would be used by the Atlanta Police Foundation would cover 150 acres. A lot's going to be going on this proposed site. There would be very dangerous activities going on there, like shooting ranges, explosives testing, burning buildings tests, all sorts of things that you wouldn't want in your backyard, right? And so when we canvassed, not only did the residents we talked to, they didn't know that this was happening in the first place. They reacted with shock when I told them that your city councilwoman, Joyce Shepard, is the person who proposed this. And on top of that, she's claiming that all of her constituents are on board with this. And nearly everyone we talked to had some sort of negative reaction upon hearing this, whether they were reacting to a potential increase in police presence in their neighborhood. Lots of people didn't want that because they know that police, harass and target and brutalize people. Some reactions, were pertaining to the environmental consequences of this. The APF essentially intends to bulldoze at least 150 acres of historic forest. And in Atlanta, a city that's known as the city in the forest, we want to protect our tree cover that still remains as temperatures rise annually and we're facing the real dangers of global warming. Our green space is something that we very much want to protect. On top of that, studies have shown that shooting ranges can lead to things like lead poisoning, which could have environmental consequences as well as health consequences on the surrounding residents. And so there was just all sorts of people were able to have negative reactions to this proposal, no matter what kind of person they were, what their political background was, whether they were in favor of policing or not. And yet City Council has obstructed all opportunities for public comment during this entire process. Our campaign, we've been doing call-ins, Sunrise Movement has as well. There have been hours upon hours of public comment left by constituents for City Council, and they've essentially ignored all of it. On top of that, there was a lot of backlash to the perceived lack of public input. And in response to that, the Atlanta Police Foundation did host 2 public listening sessions, which were essentially captive audience PowerPoints in which they pushed pro-police propaganda points and did not truly allow participants to speak, to ask real questions, leave comment. In the very beginning of this public info session, audience was capped at 100 people. So I was locked out, lots of people were locked out. And on top of that, we couldn't leave real comment. They cherry picked the questions. None of the questions that I submitted were answered. And so in response to this, our coalition hosted a people's town hall in early August, in which all members of the community were invited to come and speak and truly voice their concerns about this facility. We did invite City Council members, and so Antonio Brown and City Council President Joyce Shepard attended. Antonio Brown did indicate that he would vote no. So this is just an overview of the work that we've been doing throughout the entirety of this campaign. A lot of it has involved public engagement and involving everyday people and talking to the residents that have essentially been excluded from this entire process. And something that, we have wanted to really push narrative-wise is that, this is not what democracy is supposed to look like. Democracy, our city council representatives should be responsive to their actual constituents and the people that live here, not the wealthy donors on the board of the Atlanta Police Foundation. And for those of you who don't know a little background on the Atlanta Police Foundation, it's a board of 40 corporate elites, people who come from Chick-fil-A, Home Depot, Cox Enterprises, all of these big, bad, evil companies. And in this situation, we're seeing our city council responding to the demands of these corporate elites over, everyday, regular, working class people of Atlanta. And so to wrap this up, this past weekend, community movement builders, Sunrise and Atlanta DSA hosted a rally at the city capitol. It was really great. There were some really fantastic speakers, and this preceded the vote on August 16th. So yesterday we were all anxiously waiting, listening in on the city council meeting. We were pretty positive actually that we wouldn't have the votes and that this would pass, that it would just be pushed through. And we're speculating on what our response would be to that, but in fact, the ordinance actually got tabled at yesterday's meeting. So now we have until September 7th. And so we are excitedly plotting what our response is going to be now. It's going to be really exciting, but I hope that was a good overview. There's been a lot going on in this last month and a half.
No, it's been a lot of going on, a lot of, like you said, plotting, a lot of shenanigans. I know y'all at DSA and DARC have been doing canvassing. I joined y'all one day on Saturday, and I live in District 12, so I And I remember going out and there's this like random truck that walked because I was walking. He's like, "What are you doing?" And then I let him know what was going on, and he's like, "I don't even know what Joy Shepherd looks like." So that was really interesting too. And so how long were you actually canvassing for?
So we canvassed from, I can't remember the exact date. I think it was the last Saturday in June up until August 7th. It was every weekend between.
So multiple weekends. Do you know roughly about how many people you talked to or how many doors you knocked?
Oh, I can get those numbers, but it was definitely in the thousands. We printed out thousands of flyers and we handed them all out. It was a lot of people.
No, thank you. No, yeah, it's a really good overview, and there's just so many other organizations also doing so many things. But it was interesting to see how, do you recall, I know that Council Member Joy Shepherd had introduced the ordinance, but then it initially got tabled in one of the committees, I believe, and then it got reintroduced. Can you talk a little bit more about that detail?
About why it was tabled?
The first time. So I think I believe that it was first introduced and then maybe like kind of held, but then it got brought back up.
Yes, so it was initially held for a few reasons. I think that a few committee members understood that it hadn't been a democratic process up until that point and wanted to take some more time to receive public input, to just the plans were really rushed through by the Atlanta Police Foundation, and it's because they are on a timeline. They could lose the funds for this site if we delay too long. So that's kind of been part of our strategy. And so, but the Finance Committee did table this because they felt like they didn't have enough information, and there was a lot of community outrage about this, right? And there was a group of, I think, just organizers who appeared outside of Joy Shepherd's house. They made a lot of noise. She ended up calling the police and then making a press statement that same day. And I think all of that really forced City Council to take some time and considering the public outrage.
And hopefully they do the same as they tabled the vote yesterday. Just congratulations to all of y'all for getting that done, getting that delay. But it's also really interesting with that supposed public engagement. There's only 2 listening sessions, I believe, one for Atlanta residents and one for DeKalb County residents, which is interesting because a lot of this land affects people who are not even within the actual city of Atlanta limits. So it's so interesting to see that this council member is deciding what to do with land that isn't actually part of her constituency within her district or even her city. So these folks are left out of the process, even if they wanted to be engaged. They don't have anyone to speak up to. And I recall I was in that one listening session for City of Atlanta residents, and I was submitting questions in Spanish, right? There's a lot of Latinx immigrants in the city of Atlanta, and especially as we're seeing like kind of changes in gentrification, there's folks there that also are not English speakers. So it's kind of unfortunate that the city of Atlanta didn't provide any kind of interpretation availability to us, right? So I was like, let me just submit these questions in Spanish about environmental concerns and just why there hasn't been community input, and nothing, no response. There wasn't even someone saying, sorry, I don't speak Spanish, none of that, right? So it was just completely ignored. And yeah, it was not a lot of input. But thank you so much for that really good overview of the campaign. I'm going to invite folks, if you have any questions, if you're watching on the Facebook Live, feel free to make any questions in the chat, in the comment section. I'm going to do my best to try to kind of go through those and see if I can ask any of the panelists these questions. But thank you so much, Kelsey, for that run through. So now we're going to talk about this campaign, this Cop City, this ordinance. Why was it important to speak up against this ordinance, against the process by which it's happening, to speak up against why there has been no community input, the whole process? So the first part, which is for this ordinance, was going to build a training facility for the Atlanta police and fire departments. So policing, I'm going to pass it over to Marte to kind of talk about, what's the policing theme? What's the aspect, to kind of talk more about that in regards specifically to this campaign to stop Cop City.
All right. Well, one thing that is important to understand about Cop City is that we're talking about like a project that's occurring on land that essentially, like, for the last like for a long time. I guess I'll definitely say has been used as part of kind of like the war that like police in the American police state has been engaging in against the masses of people in general and Black people in specific. So we've already had to, we already know that this land like used to be the Atlanta prison farm where police would capture Black people and have them do forced labor. Right now, that trend has continued. And the way that that trend has continued is now they're trying to use it to basically train police further. Now, a lot of people might say that, and I guess this is part of the narrative of Cop City in general, that if police had more training, that would make things like safer for people who are victims of police brutality generally, which Black people are definitely included in. However, we know that that's not really the direction. Well, first of all, like I'm just like the nature of the police in general, right? Doesn't fit in with that. Like their goal or their purpose for existence is basically to defend the capitalist and white supremacist status quo, right? So you know what I'm saying? Obviously, like that would cause us to have to turn a critical eye towards what's going on with Cop City in the first place. But one thing that's important to understand is that last year we had one of the greatest uprisings in American history against police brutality, and in Atlanta, that was a very very thing. We had the not only like the uprisings all across the city, but also what happened at the Rayshard Brooks Peace Center, where we actually had people, especially Black people, uniting in order to defend our own livelihoods, and creating kind of like a liberated zone that that police could not enter. This is the type of thing that kind of like strikes terror in the hearts of the status quo, so to be, because it shows the militancy of the masses of people and the possibility that Black people and people in general will refuse to submit to the brutality and the rule of the police. Therefore, we now have the city where they are trying to train police officers in urban warfare tactics. You know what I'm saying? Almost as like a counterinsurgency type of strategy, in order to keep that firm grasp over the Black community and all communities that the police have traditionally threatened. So I think that understand the nature of policing in order to really understand why this Cop City is coming into being. If we understand the nature of policing, then we'll understand that there's no way that this Cop City could be a good thing for Black people and brown people and poor people, right? Because when they're using the city as a model to practice waging warfare on the masses of people in Atlanta, right? That's really, you know, as I said, like it's practicing warfare against our people, right? We know that police don't really stop crime. Really, what they do is they punish crime sometimes. You know what I'm saying? And that isn't even a preventative measure in the first place. And it's also kind of like by nature retributive. Like it's not very like it's not preventative, and it's not really to help anybody, but really just to put people behind bars and treat them like animals, right? And so with this type of practice of creating this type of training facility for the police to be better at doing that, there's no way that that can be a good thing for our communities. And that's one of the things that Community Movement Builders is really focused on, recognizing the nature of these of this project and how it will affect our people, so that we can resist it better. So in order to try to raise consciousness on this issue, we've had teach-ins, we've done canvassing, we've done, we've worked with other organizations in coalition in order to oppose Cop City. We've even told organizations in other states about what's been going on here. Every level that we could reasonably, you have saying wage struggle on, we have wage struggle in order to prevent this from coming into being, because it really would just be a great threat to our people and for the Black liberation movement and all liberation movements in the future.
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely reckless and intellectually dishonest to recognize the role and the roots, traces, origins of policing, right? And the legacy of slavery that it is, right? Mm-hmm. Especially considering what land this is. It's not just the huge over 380 acres of green space of forest, but it's an Atlanta prison farm, right? That was originally Muskogee owned. It was taken away, and then it became a plantation. And from that plantation, it just changed, name. It's still slavery with prison labor that was unpaid. And considering, this training facility, just to put it in comparison, right, in context, for those who aren't very familiar with what this facility would be. So the Atlanta, and this is from a really good local writer, King Williams. They wrote a butteratl.com article that we will share. So he wrote that, for comparison, Atlanta Police Department, even at full capacity of 2,000 officers, doesn't compare to New York Police Department officers of 40,000 plus, or LAPD officers of 10,000 plus. So New York's police department of 40,000 plus officers, their training facility is 32 acres. LAPD's officers of more than 10,000, their facility is 21 acres. Meanwhile, the initial plan for this Cop City included things like a 40-acre horse park, which is currently bigger than the 32-acre training facility that APD already has. So 381 acres sounds like a small number, but it's physical land. It's huge. And this prison farm, you're destroying the history, right, by replacing it with a training facility that's only going to continue to, oppress and brutalize people. Not to mention that the city of Atlanta already participates in a program called the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange, which is already a privately controlled and largely privately funded police exchange program where police officials are trained by other foreign oppressive governments, such as the Israeli police or Israeli army, in tactics that brutalize and instill fear in the community. So Atlanta police is already trained by the Israeli military. What more training can we possibly expect from police officers, right? It's not any kind of training that will actually help us. Thank you, Marte, for really that overview. So I'm gonna, again, this is green space, right, that we're destroying. We're destroying trees. So I'm gonna pass it over to Sheza to talk more about the environmental impacts that this training facility will have. What will happen when we bulldoze all these trees and the environment, the ecology, the ecosystem that exists there. Sheza, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Susie. I think that the way that I've been describing this Cop City issue to a lot of people is that this is an issue very uniquely at the intersection of racial, environmental, and economic justice. And it's kind of crazy that this is like a kind of a representation of a lot of things that are wrong with our existing system of like economic exploitation, because we currently live in a system whose purpose, as we've seen time and time again, is the concentration and enclosure of wealth and power. And that leads to things like slavery, that leads to genocide of indigenous peoples, that leads to displacement and destruction of land and the depletion of resources. And we sort of briefly talked a little bit about the history of the land, but like you said, this was land that was stolen from the Muskogee people. It was turned into Key Plantation, where Black people were enslaved, and then it was turned into the old Atlanta prison farm, where folks were forced to perform unpaid labor for the for the benefit of wealthy white landowners. So this whole issue, this whole Cop City issue is a direct result of an exploitative system on land that has been stolen again and again. And now it's going to be bulldozed entirely without reparations, without repercussions, in order to build a facility that, as we've outlined, exists to uphold the status quo and further the interests of the wealthy. And just to kind of talk a little bit about the specific environmental impacts, these plans propose the destruction of the old Atlanta prison farm, which is the city's largest intact green space. This will fragment the South River forest and leave the surrounding areas susceptible to stormwater flooding, which is Atlanta's top natural disaster, and a disaster that's increasing in intensity due to the ramifications of climate change. Bulldozing the tree cover also means just eliminating one of our best natural defenses against climate change, against human impact, against anthropogenic impact that we leave by our carbon output. And we have very few of those natural defenses left. They're things that we should be trying to protect, not destroy. The Atlanta Police Foundation's plans for the facility also have environmental concerns attached to them as well. They include plans for an explosives testing site and a shooting range. And research shows that runoff from these weapons testing sites will flow into the already endangered South River, which has already been plagued by sewage pollution and is already endangered and already needs defending. It will also contaminate the urban farm that's been proposed in the Atlanta Police Foundation's own plans for the facility. This means that people who eat produce from that farm and people who fish from the South River could be exposed to heavy metals and other toxic chemicals, and that pollution is being ignored. And also just noting that this is a facility that's being built in a historically disenfranchised community. The brunt of the impact, the environmental impact, all of this will be on marginalized communities, as it always is. It'll be on working class communities, it'll be on people of color and people who can't defend themselves because they don't have the wealth that is needed to defend yourself from the impacts of climate change. So essentially the public is being put at risk environmentally, in addition to this being an expansion of policing. And this is all happening for the sake of backing the interests of the Atlanta Police Foundation and the corporations that support the Atlanta Police Foundation and donate to it.
Thank you so much, Sheza. Recently, on Thursday, I believe, Georgia Sierra Club dropped a letter to City Council opposing this ordinance, along with 15 other environmental groups, one of which was Sunrise Atlanta. Poder Latinx also signed on. But there's just there's no way to exaggerate this, but we are in the middle of a climate crisis, an environmental crisis, where today the Union for Concerned Scientists actually just published a report that's too hot to work. About 20% of Georgia's workforce are outdoor workers, and the heat is getting worse and worse and worse. It's hot as in Atlanta. And tree cover actually helps absorb that heat. And in fact, it's getting so hot, we actually need more tree cover. There have been several experts that had mentioned, we need more tree canopy in the city of Atlanta. And that green space isn't just the largest in the city or even the state. It is the largest green space of any major metropolitan city in the country, over almost 400 acres. And it's getting so hot, they're going to tear down all these trees to put concrete. It's going to make the city of Atlanta hotter. Atlanta is also really prone to flash flooding. Anytime there's a torrential rainpour, you'll see random areas in Mechanicsville, another predominantly Black neighborhood, like it's just flooded. Tree canopy also helps absorb that rainfall. So I just want to, just a few other kind of points on environmental. Thank you so much, Sheza, for really pointing out the fact that this is, people get hit first and worst are going to be the marginalized communities in these areas. So I'm just going to bring up a few points that, Georgia Sierra Club was amazing in leading this letter and sending it to Atlanta City Council, and just bringing up points. There's a Metro Regional Youth Detention Center nearby. So the plans put forward by the Atlanta Police Foundation risk exposing the public to lead and other hazardous chemicals, converting the tree cover into concrete that will make Atlanta hotter, and destroying a habitat that supports beavers, amphibians, and other native wildlife. The plans place shooting and explosive ranges adjacent to proposed farm, a youth detention center, and a creek, which drains into a fishing river, creating multiple pathways by which the public and Black youth specifically may be exposed to lead. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Police Foundation has also published outright falsehoods about the forest. They're framing the natural succession of native trees as an invasion. And this is all happening in a historically Black and lower income part of the city on a piece of land where prisoners were forced to farm and endure inhumane conditions as late as the 1990s. This land needs to heal, and we need to perform comprehensive toxicological, ecological, and archaeological studies before anyone breaks ground on any project. And the reason I say archaeological is that there is an organization, the Atlanta Press Collective, that actually did a brief history on the city, this Atlanta City prison farm, that may implicate that this may be a burial ground for zoo animals and former inmates. So look, I'm not a spiritual person, but burial ground folks, like, it's disrespectful. The fact that there's no real study to study this, right? It's just a lot. I'm gonna go back to the Youth Detention Center. So Atlanta Police Foundation claims that the new shooting range is gonna be about half a mile away from all residents. However, that shooting range is only a few hundred feet from the youth detention facility. These predominantly Black and imprisoned youth have had no voice in these plans. And not only would the daily sound of gunfire and explosions harm these youth psychologically, there's also a risk of airborne lead pollution from the shooting range. So there's just so many environmental concerns that have not been studied, requested, asked for. Atlanta Police Foundation has just been, feeding falsehoods on naming several native species of trees as invasive species, right? Saying that for every tree that they tear down, they're going to plant 100 more. But as someone from the Defend Atlanta Forest and the South River Forest Coalition has said, these trees are generation. They're over 30, 40 years. You can't replace 30, 40 years of life. So thank you so much, Sheza, for that portion. So I'm going to kind of start talking more about how the vote happened. So on Monday, yesterday, the Atlanta City Council was able to, this ordinance up for a vote. As Kelsey had said, we all thought it was going to pass, but it didn't. 8 persons voted to table this ordinance. Tabling means it's going to be revisited at the next city council meeting, which is going to be on September 7th. So out of all the city council members, the persons who voted to table it, to delay it, were council members Matt Westmoreland, Andre Dickens, Carla Smith, Amir Faroki, Antonio Brown, Madeline Archibong, Jennifer Ide, and Andrea Boone. Of those 8, only 2 are explicitly opposed to this ordinance to build Cap City regardless, and that is Carla Smith and Antonio Brown. There are 3 council members who still support this facility. They still support putting it in this location, and they are council members Matt Westmoreland, Andre Dickens, and Amir Faroki. So they all said they support the facility and its location because they believe that tabling would allow time to improve the proposal with public input, which is just wild to say because this proposal wasn't born out of the community. It wasn't a need that the community asked for. It just came from the developers, the corporations that sit on the board of the Atlanta Police Foundation and decided that this is what's needed. So for example, in a Facebook comment, Matt Westmoreland responded to someone who said that he voted against the Cop City ordinance. He said, "I didn't vote against it. I voted in favor in committee last Wednesday. Yesterday's vote was to hold the legislation until our next council meeting to correct public engagement missteps, better engage nearby residents, and ensure we both build the training center we need while also preserving as much green space as we can." And I've spoken to the Police Foundation almost every day for the last 2 weeks. So this is something completely wild. These are not public engagement missteps. This has just been public engagement lack of completely. So Andre Dickens and Emery Faroki also believe in that this delay will just kind of give a chance to improve supposedly the proposal. But that's not necessarily true. As Kelsey and the other organizations have been canvassing the neighborhoods, folks don't want this or they don't know about it. And there's no way to really correct that at this point without completely removing it from even their eye to vote on. So The narrow 8-7 vote on this to table this legislation followed roughly 4 hours of public comment, whereas about 75% of that public comment was against the training center's location. The committee that Matt Westmoreland was referencing was the Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee and the Finance Executive Committee. Council member Carla Smith was the only council member to vote against the ordinance, while council member Jennifer Ide was absent on bereavement leave. And during the Finance Committee meeting, the City Council unanimously passed an amendment that would require council members to be able to receive and view the lease before moving forward with the vote. So they made an amendment to receive and review the lease, meaning that at that point, there has been no copy of a lease presented to City Council. So they're trying to pass this ordinance on Cop City without even mentioning any kind of lease. And of those, I kind of briefly want to reference a lot of the public comment has been limited. It's been usually the day before a committee meeting or the hearing or the City Council meetings from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., allowing only 3 hours for folks to voice their concerns. And the reason for that is actually new. So last summer, a bill introduced by Jennifer Ide called the Rachel Brooks Bill, which would essentially withhold some funding from the Atlanta Police budget while they kind of figure out any kind of reforms or changes they want to make. About 17 hours of public comment was made in support of that bill. But there was a particular council member, Magicets, who didn't want to continue hearing several hours of public comment and instead decided to pass something that would limit public comment from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And that was effective a year ago. So this just kind of starts telling you that City Council is not really kind of engaging the public at all. 3 hours before a meeting is not enough time to actually allow the public to talk about whether or not they support this. So that's kind of just a little bit background on that, on the vote. But it's interesting to see how the persons, there's a lot of them are running not for their city council seats, but for other offices. Some of them are running for mayor or city council president. But I'm going to move over to something about the narrative. There's a lot of narrative. There's, the police saying they need training, the police saying that, there's a crime wave, and the community saying that this isn't what they need, isn't what they want. So I'm going to pass it over to Kelsey, kind of, talk about this narrative, that this training facility, does this protect us?
Yeah, I think unfortunately there's a kind of monopoly on the narrative right now that's held by city council, corporate media, and corporate entities like the Atlanta Police Foundation. For example, when the Atlanta Police Foundation held those public info sessions, they completely controlled that narrative. They had a captive audience, which they showed a PowerPoint with pro-police talking points. Likewise, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is owned by Cox Enterprises, who is on the board of the Atlanta, or one of their representatives is on the board of the Atlanta Police Foundation, they almost have a monopoly on the narrative on crime and policing in Atlanta. And when city council gives them talking points or press releases, they just reiterate those same talking points without fact checking, without seeking community or organizer input. And so their narrative is what's seen as truth. And that's why we as organizers have to work with the community and independent press to push the truth and our own narrative. And the reality is that, city council wants us to believe that more policing and more surveillance will keep residents in Atlanta safe. And that's simply not true, because safety, if you're addressing harm and violence at the source, you're addressing people's real material needs like housing, healthcare, quality education, support for our houseless community, or really housing for all, making sure all people have access to nutrition and clean water. If city council really wanted to address people's safety, they would address these things first before criminalizing people for falling through the cracks of a capitalist system that was designed to fail them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelsey. Atlanta is a city with the greatest income inequality in the whole country, right? And we're in the middle of a pandemic. People are being evicted. People have lost their jobs. They're getting sick and they can't take off from work without losing their job or wages. Thank you so much, Kelsey. So there was mention of crime wave, right? Like what is this crime wave? Marte, do you want to kind of chime in on that?
Right. So on the idea of like a crime wave being the reason why the Cop City initiative is necessary, ultimately this is kind of like an age-old kind of excuse for the further militarization of the police. And we know this because we've seen this kind of like type of narrative be put forth many times in the past. You know, you've seen the war on drugs, you've seen a lot of just the war on crime in general all throughout the United States, not just in Atlanta. We've seen that being used to further mass incarceration or further policing or the occupation of communities of Black and Brown people by police, right? The reality of the situation is kind of any kind of so-called crime that exists in society, like as of now, right? Most of the time, these things are the results of objective material conditions that exist within society itself. And a lot of those objective material conditions are the result of kind of the capitalist system that we have today. So when, you know what I'm saying, people do not have, like when people are getting evicted, when people are with this pandemic, when people are part of a community of people, like for Black people that have traditionally been oppressed, mistreated, held down in many different ways, there is going to be a consequence of that. That's going to be in the form of people not being able to operate within the legal system. You know what I'm saying? And end up either in conflict with one another or like doing something that's outside of the legal system in general, right? And those things would contribute to what we call crime, right? I think that you could even make an argument about like even by the regular standards of law and order, right? We're in this situation which, I mean, it's the police that say whether or not there's a spike in crime or not. You know what I'm saying? And we're dealing with this during a time where like the courts are closed during the pandemic. So there's also like the problem of people, it's like that, I mean, people not really even being convicted of these crimes, but no matter what, right? Even if there was a real spike in crime, right, there are objective sources of these issues that cannot be solved through just heavy-handed measures by the state. It cannot be solved that way. If that were possible, like then that would already be there, it would already be solved, right? Because we would have, you know what I'm saying? We always have these problems in any kind of society that functions like this, that is unequal like this, of crime or people fighting against one another, right? When gangs in Atlanta fight against each other, it's not really because like we don't have enough police. You know what I'm saying? There's police everywhere. Like, you know what I'm saying? Already, you know, it's not really that. It's more because of the social and economic conditions that exist that condition some of these intercommunal feuds. You know what I'm saying? What we really need is either like more funding towards like a lot of the programs in the community or the structures in the community that will provide people with the housing, food and economic justice that they need, or we really need like a movement that can unite people and bring an end to the harm that people are causing, like the masses of people are causing to one another, and unite people, which would be entirely outside of what the state demands, right? So I think that, yeah,
No,
exactly.
you're right about, you know, what do people actually need, right? What is it?
Yeah.
What does safety mean? Thank you so much, Marte, for really talking about, you know, that narrative that they're pushing. I'm going to pass it over to Sheza to talk about, you know, what is safety? What does it mean? What does it really look like for us?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because I think that the Cop City issue is really, really representative of the narrative battle that like this like nation has been mired in for decades over what it means to actually feel safe. And I think it's really representative over the scope and scale of the last year of events in Atlanta, because we've had people marching and rallying in the streets, you know, all summer. And I think a lot of people would argue, a lot of people would agree that like now we have plans for a police training facility at Cop City. And I think people would agree that at this point, like the way that the city has responded has not been reflective of the interests and needs of the people who have been pushing and demanding and marching on the streets and, you know, woeing the loss of their like families and loved ones who have been lost to a brutal carceral state. And a big reason that is still happening, and a big reason why the like reactionary response to the uprisings was just pushing down on policing, making policing worse, refusing to close ACDC, trying to build rolling out a 5-year plan to try and build a police training facility, is because we are stuck in this battle over what does safety actually look like? What do police actually do? And most people, I think in order to get to a point where you can understand that police do not protect us, you really have to question the status quo. You really have to ask yourself hard questions about yourself and the world and your place in it and what police actually do. And, you know, we had the broken windows policing ideology of the 1960s, and we had the Clinton crime bill, and we had, you know, both parties uphold a carceral state in order to uphold the status quo. And if we look even further back at the history and the origins of policing, a lot of people know about the slave controls, and a lot of people maybe don't know that police were first created in order to quell labor strikes, in order to make it so that the people who are wealthy and the people who are white and the people who are in charge and in power can uphold that power and keep that power. So I would argue that like even past this issue, even past making sure that something like Cop City doesn't happen again, we need to fight this by exposing this false narrative in order to actually create conditions in Atlanta where we can move positively in the direction of, you know, moving away from policing, paying reparations, and investing in systems of collective care, like what Kelsey was talking about earlier, you know, housing, rent control, clean air and clean water, access to transportation, access to food, disability rights, and aid for our homeless neighbors. And I think that that's something that we saw when we were all canvassing for whether, like I was out this last month canvassing for municipals and canvassing for Stop Cop City, and people just talked about the fact that there's a food desert and the fact that their streets are broken and they don't have sidewalks and there are potholes everywhere and there are issues that we can fix. But we need to change this narrative that protection equals control in order to fix those issues.
Absolutely right in all that, you know, folks, food desert, people, you know, need more things. But thank you so much, Shazza. So I'm just gonna let you know, what do next steps look like? You know, what can folks do, especially if whether you live in the city or not? How can you plug in? What can you do? What can you say? What is there? What are the next steps? So I'm gonna have, so each of y'all can kind of, I'll open it up. Y'all can talk about what y'all have going on, what folks can plug into. Kelsey, what's up with the DSA? What are y'all doing?
All right, so we're ready to go. We'll be doing stuff up until September 7th. Maybe it will be tabled again, who knows? But this weekend we have a canvas planned at Cone Park. If you go to our website, stopcopcity.org, all of our events will be linked there. It doesn't matter if you've never canvassed before. This is a great place to start. Bring a friend, wear a mask. We're going to be talking to the people that lived in the most impacted areas. And it's always a great experience to talk to real people and to have interactions with, I don't know, just everyday people. And there's always an opportunity to do some political education about things like abolition and municipal issues and stuff like that. This Saturday at 8, we'll also have an event at the Georgia Beer Garden on Edgewood Avenue. It's our monthly social event, Eat, Drink, and Be Marxist, but this one will be a sort of Stop Cop City edition. So we'll be tabling, we'll have literature. If you just want to come talk to us and figure out how you can get plugged in, learn more about Stop Cop City and the issues, everyone's welcome to come. It'll be really fun. Other than that, you can go to our website, atldsa.org. atlDSA.org/join is where you can join and become a member and get plugged in with all the cool stuff we're doing. But we're definitely excited to get the ball rolling again on Stop Cop City stuff, and everyone is invited to participate.
All right, amazing, awesome. Thank you so much, Kelsey. Sheza, so what's going on with Sunrise Atlanta? How can folks plug in with y'all?
Yeah, so we will be working in coalition alongside DARC, DSA, Community Movement Builders, and Black Alliance for Peace, so World Without Prisons, and other organizations to just kind of push forward the narrative, engage in some powerful actions, and kind of show like city council through art, through people power, through the way that we like stage and coordinate events, that like this is not something that the people want. This is something that we're all against. And then I think in terms of just like pushing forth the narrative on moving away from an extractive economic system that causes issues like Cop City to one that actually, you know, focuses on solving people's problems, working towards ecological restoration and community resilience and social equity. That is also something that we're going to try to work on more in the long term. And we are also hoping to do some work around the municipals later this year post Cop City, but yeah, we'll see what happens. I would definitely recommend, like what Kelsey said, check out the stopcopcity.org landing page, which is where all future events will be updated. We are meeting all this week to make sure we have things for folks to plug into. So that's probably the best way to stay updated. And then I'd also follow Sunrise, DARC, DSA, Community Movement Builders, all the organizations on social media, because we will be posting about these things like crazy too. So those are kind of the best ways to stay involved and stay engaged with what's happening.
Awesome, thanks so much. And then with Community Movement Builders, Marte, how do folks plug in with y'all?
All right, so as far as like plugging in with us, I think that the best way is, I mean, you can visit our website and just kind of see what we do in general, right? Community movement builders will always be like a part of any kind of struggle against the militarization of the police or
All right, looks like Marte froze. So one of the ways you can join is you can follow Community Movement Builders on Twitter, Instagram, and also online. We can drop the link. We can drop the link in the comments. All right. Sorry, we lost them. But you know, community movement builders, Sunrise, and DSA has just been one of many groups that have really been working in coalition with each other. So you can also follow. You can also plug in with Poder Latinx, poderlatinx.org /Georgia. We have a lot of stuff kind of going. We do a lot of issue-based organizing too, on issues such as economic justice, paid leave, immigrant justice, and environmental justice. I want to thank Kelsey, Sheza, and Marte for joining and sharing your experiences, the work y'all have been doing, and just sharing kind of the story and like, you know, the other side of the story, right? There have been so many groups, residents, community members, and everyone in between that dared to take on the Atlanta City Council and the Atlanta Police Foundation. But you know, there's a lot of work still to do, and there's so many organizations. I'm gonna start reading a whole bunch of them out. I may miss a few, but there's just so many good work being done here, folks just working with each other. The South River Forest Coalition, Save the Old Atlanta Prison Farm, the Nature Conservancy in Georgia, A World Without Police, Defend Atlanta Forest, and the letter that Georgia Sierra Club wrote along with other organizations like Climate Reality Atlanta Chapter, Dogwood Alliance, Echo Action. And another thing I really want to highlight is, we want to thank really the powerful research, writing, and reporting done. So I'm gonna, 1 second. A lot of powerful reporting, right? For example, the Mainline Zine, you should definitely follow them. One of the founders, Asia Arnold, published also an article on The Intercept. And the Mainline also obtained an internal memo that shows the police foundation's response to proposed amendments on the training facility legislation. You can also follow I Am King Williams. His name is King Williams. He wrote a Cop City primer on Butter ATL, and also he wrote an article at Mainline to talk about the crime narrative and kind of what we see online happening. And also the Atlanta Community Press Collective at Atlanta Press. They published a brief history of the Atlanta City Prison Farm, really talking about the time when it was city or local and federal owned, the prison labor history before that, and also the burial grounds that it may be. And just remember that CEO of Cox Enterprises owns the AJC, who also chairs the Atlanta Committee for Progress and is hosting a fundraiser for the Atlanta Police Foundation on October 27th. So this is why it's so important to have this kind of unbiased, truthful reporting, because the AJC has been publishing a lot of articles that in support of or voicing the support of others who do. Just remembering that. But otherwise, for those watching, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you all get plugged in, read more about the information, and connect with these organizations that are doing a lot of this good work. Everyone's doing something a little bit different to speak out against Cop City. Not everyone likes to do the same things. Everyone has different skills and capacity. So I'm super optimistic that everyone has something for you to do. Thank you so much. The work is not over. And as you showed in the hours of public comment, there's this refrain in Spanish, no somos uno, no somos cien, somos un chingo, cuéntenos bien. We are not one, we are not 100, we're a shit ton, count us well. It's a really rough translation, but it sounds so much cooler in Spanish, I promise you. Also, a call to action, if you want to text Poder at 52886 to stay connected. Otherwise, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much again to Kelsey, Sheza, and Marte for sharing with us everything that's been going on.